talked about the influence of Aristotle. And Aristotle's influence spreads quite far, and not just him, but the Greek culture gets spread out. Why? Well, because of his boss. And he has a boss, Alexander the Great. Why was he such a big deal? Well, because he was for the time a military genius. Okay, he did things like cities encircled by water. You can't catch us. He will just build a bridge out of dirt across the water until the rivers themselves get reforged. He will do things like that. He lost some battles, but militarily brilliant and logistically brilliant. So one of the reasons he never ran out of supplies is wherever he would go, he would continue a supply chain into the next area. So he was always linked up. He was never out off the grid, so to speak. And for that reason, he was always able to be resupplied. Even when he was in the jungles of India, he had a supply chain that went back to Greece. And we need supplies, bring it up to the head of the line. But that also enabled him to send stuff back for Aristotle to study. That's kind of what we do. Dear Aristotle, here's an elephant. I don't know what it has a trunk. Here you go. Study it. And that's what Aristotle would do. So that's why Aristotle was able to be such an authority in the ancient world on a lot of stuff, because Alexander's conquests allowed for a lot of access to things that the Greeks formerly didn't know about. Now, they knew about some things from Egypt. They knew about some things from Babylon. They had contact with other places, possibly even India before. Not too much direct interaction, but here it is. It's all under Alexander. Everything from northern Africa, parts of Egypt, parts of the Levant, the Arabian Peninsula, parts of India, parts of Afghanistan. In fact, when Alexander dies, he doesn't have any children. So there's no son of Alexander that gets to become king. So it gets split up amongst his generals. For example, Ptolemy gets Egypt. Okay, Ptolemy's great-great-great-great-granddaughter is Cleopatra. So she's actually a Greek Egyptian. Seleucus rules what becomes known as Syria. Okay, that's a Greek kingdom, okay, and so on. And but the last of the Greek kingdoms is actually in Afghanistan. That's the last one to go, because that's where Alexander spread his empire. It's just when we think of Greek, we think of Greece. But this Greek culture spread out very, very far. And when the Romans take over, they're sort of more of a Western focus, and they're going to do that. But at least at this point, in that part of the world, Greek is getting spoken everywhere. In fact, you'll find in the mountains in Afghanistan and even farther east, there are little statues of Buddha with a little Hercules next to him. Why? Where did the Hercules come from? The Greeks. So, there's that spreading of culture, and Aristotle is here for this. That's part of the reason why Aristotle's ideas stick around in the East. In the West, they're kind of lost for a little while, sort of. But that's why this is going to become so important, so prevalent, and some of the other Greek traditions that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So what I want to do next is talk about really two other concepts in Aristotle. One is going to be this notion, psyche. And yet, you know those, sometimes we have these English words that start with PS, and we go, no, you skip the P. Actually, in Greek, you actually make that ps sound like you're about to whisper. And in English, we just lost the p on the beginning. We just say, like psychology. In fact, psychology comes from this word psyche. What does it mean? Soul. Soul. So we're going to talk about Aristotle's notion of soul. And then we're also going to talk about Aristotle's notion of theos. What does that mean? It's usually translated as God. But he means something different by it. He doesn't mean, and actually, it's related to the word Zeus. There's this word for God in Indo-European where it has this y, like in Latin even, it's Deus. In Sanskrit, it's Dios. Aristotle does not mean Zeus by theos. This means God more in our sense of like a lowercase g. By that I mean like God in general. We're not talking about the God of Israel necessarily, Hashem, the Trinity, Allah. Not necessarily, just God in general. Although I say that because when we get to his notion of God, the Christians, the Jews, and the Muslims are going to love this in many ways. So what did Aristotle say on these points that's so significant? Well, let's start with the notion of psyche, or soul. What is it? Well, what did Plato say that the soul was? Remember, it's the real you. Yes, it's inside, it's trapped. So soul, good, body, bad, but it's trapped and it wants to get out and go back up and float up to the world of forms. But as we've already established with Aristotle, no. There is a soul, but it's not that. It's not that. And I say that because, too, when we think of the notion of soul today, now many people today are materialists or physicalists, and by that I mean there's no such thing as ghosts, there's no such thing as spirit. In spite of that, there's sort of a modern definition of soul. If I say soul, what is it? And I'm not talking about food or music. What is soul? Well, it's the thing that's kind of in you, and when you die, it goes to heaven, maybe. Kind of like, but it's you, and it's kind of a mixture of what Plato is going to say, what Christians have said, and what Aristotle has said, and some other little things all thrown together. But it's not really uniquely any of them. It's kind of a mixed bag. So yeah, what happens when you die? Well, you go up to heaven and you're playing on like a little harp on a cloud. That's not Christianity or Judaism or Islam. That's like a sloppy version of Plato. So what is the soul then? Well, there's a sense in which Plato was onto something where, yeah, that's the real you. That is your form. Aristotelians will say the soul is the form of the body. What does that mean? Like the soul of something, the formal cause. Okay, we talk about shape, right? The shape was the formal cause. But what makes something what it is its soul. If it doesn't have that anymore, it is not that thing. That's why, for example, say like a corpse, a dead body. I'm not talking about wherever you find it. Okay, whether it be in the basement or in a casket. If you find a dead body, you're like, oh, that has the shape of a human being, right? And let's assume there's no amputation whatsoever. It has a head, a body, 2 arms, 2 legs. Is it a human? Is it a human? Couch that. Is it a human being? The body? No. Why not? It's dead, right? Now, if we extract DNA from it, will it have human DNA? Yeah. So it is human, but it's not alive. What's missing? The soul. So where is it? Is there something we could, if we were going to do a vivisection, that's when something's still alive, and you decide to cut open into it. Would we find the soul somewhere in there? Well, no, it's not physical. But it's in there. But if you've ever beheld a dead body before, there's something different there at a funeral. That's not Grandpa. Maybe Grandpa was in that body, but that's not them. That's just the body. Something's not there. Something's not motivating it. In fact, this Greek word psyche, when it gets translated into Latin, it is animus. It's sort of like animated. Now, you think of cartoons, maybe, but literally, it needs to be filled with life. Like if we say something's an inanimate object, it's not alive. Or something's animated, it's filled with life. It comes from this, which is itself a Latin translation of this Greek word, psyche. So a soul is what gives something its being, makes it what it is. And when it's missing, we can kind of tell. But also, that stuff I was talking about last time about generation and corruption. You start carving the tree or part of a tree into a baseball bat. The tree goes out of being. The tree is being corrupted and disappearing while the bat is coming into being or being generated. There's a sense in which, as you start doing that carving, the soul of the tree is disappearing. Like it was there, and we're just shaving, and it's not like it's not shrinking or diminishing with every little bit that I shave off. Okay? But there's a sense in which it's disappearing. It's no longer, the soul of the tree is no longer there, and the soul of the baseball bat is coming into being. Now, I've mentioned this before. Where does this stuff come into play? Again, a lot of Aristotelian terms come up when we're talking about, say, the ethics of abortion. Does a fetus have a soul? And often it's related to the notion of form. Well, does it look like a human? Well, a zygote doesn't. An early embryo, a blastocyst doesn't, but you know what? A second trimester fetus kind of does. It has fingers and toes. It looks like a human, therefore it has a human soul at this point. It might not be a fully fledged human. It can't, come out of its mother's womb at that point and say, "Hi, Dave." But it's got that shape to it. So if something has the shape, if it has the form, there's a sense in which the soul is there. And if it's not there, we can tell, that something's off. In fact, it's not just humans that have souls. What has souls? All living things. There's a sense in which even inanimate things, that doesn't make any sense because literally the inanimate would mean no soul. Right? But an object's formal cause, you could say, is its soul. But Aristotle almost always restricts the notion of soul to living things. So there's three kinds of living things. Three kinds of souls. And we're going from the least impressive to the most impressive. First of all, there's the vegetative soul. What makes plants different from rocks? They're alive. Now today we know they have cells. Aristotle wouldn't know about a cellular structure. He hasn't. The microscope hasn't been invented yet. But they're alive. And things, you can tell something is alive. And sometimes we'll use this word organic today. But Aristotle makes this observation. You can tell something's alive when it changes on its own. That is, it's in motion on its own. Is this table going to get up and walk away? No. Now, are trees? No, but they grow on their own. The table's not going to start growing on its own. So therefore, plants have motion. Now, they don't get up and walk around, but they grow. That's a feature of living things, is growth. Vegetative souls have the ability of motion. And by motion, he means that kinesis, just change. Don't confuse motion with locomotion. I'm locomoting right now, moving around the room. Okay, motion is any kind of change. You get older, that's motion. You put on a few pounds, or lose a few pounds, that's still motion. You're breathing, that's motion. Okay, any kind of change whatsoever, that's motion. And I don't know where we translate this way. I think we should just keep the Greek, kinesis, right? Any kind of alteration whatsoever. That's what plants, vegetative souls, are capable of doing. Now, again, to show you how this Aristotelian language still sticks around, if someone's in a coma in the hospital, what do sometimes people say that they are? They're in a vegetative state. Why? Well, they're alive. Their body, they might be respirating, maybe with some assistance, maybe not. But they're not getting up and doing anything, are they? They might be in a coma. There's no sleepwalking when you're in a coma. They're not getting up and doing anything on their own. So they're in a vegetative state in this sense. It's almost like their soul is a vegetable in this sense. As a kid, that terrified me. I thought people, when they were in a vegetative state, turned into like carrots or radishes or something. It means this, that there's only capable of just that kind of motion of growth. What's the next kind of soul? Well, this one comes up to us by way of the Latin, but animal soul. Which again, it's ridiculous because the word animal just comes from this. It just means soul. So, what can an animal soul do? Well, look at your dog or cat. Do they grow like the plants? Sure. And? Exactly. They can move around. So they've got the ability of motion and self-motion. So they grow, and they can get into places that they're not supposed to. Moving around, self-motion. That's what animals can do. What are we then? I can do that. I can grow. Believe me, I know. Okay, now, but then also I can walk around. So I'm an animal? Yeah. But we're kind of like, human beings are kind of like animals special edition. Okay, you're an animal plus. So these things are, there's an ascendancy here, or a hierarchy. Animals are exactly like the vegetative souls, except they've also got, I'm thinking of like, basic, pro, premium when it comes to souls or something like that. So basic, all right, you've got the motion, you're a vegetable. That's plant life. Animal life, you've got the motion, and you can also move around. You got self-motion, but you're a human being. You want the premium deal? What's the premium deal? This plus reason. So that makes us the human soul, the rational soul. Maybe there's other rational souls out there. What you've got this motion. You've also got self-motion. And you've also got reason. Rational animals. What are we humans? We're rational animals. Because we're alive, and we use reason. Now, what does it mean to reason? Well, for Plato, it's remembering really hard. It's observing the world, using our senses, and making generalizations from our senses. That's what it is. And that's also why it's this empiricism. It's not I remember the forms. It's that we look around. You know how it's not that we're remembering, oh, look, a form of the table. I remember it. Yes, there was the table. No, it's that you look. All right, we learned that's a table, that's a table, what do they have in common? Tableness. And then I can extrapolate from that. I can look, if I see something else that looks similar to this, I can conclude this thing conforms to this image that I've constructed in my mind. Not that a child does this formally. No little kid sits down and goes, aha, wait, I have extrapolated this particular kind of object and can therefore instantiate that from this. They don't do that. But just because you can't be metacognizant of a process doesn't mean you can't do the process. There are so many things that we're not conscious of. You don't have to know how respiration works in order to breathe. You don't have to know that water is H2O in order to drink it and know that it's water. Like, imagine before chemistry was invented, all those people drinking water in the ancient world had no idea what they were drinking. Yes, they did. They knew they were drinking water, even if they didn't understand its chemical composition. So understanding a thing is not the same thing as being able to do a thing. But for us in this case, rational animal, what does it mean to use our reason? Precisely that. We extrapolate and make generalizations using empiricism, our senses, not just remembering backwards. Okay, that's how he was able to make all those conclusions just about, the verb to be that I talked about last time, all those predicates. How was he able to do that? Well, just look at how we talk. Think back to how we... Look at it. Look around. You want to know how something works? Look at it. And this is new. Okay, this is not modern science, but Francis Bacon is going to, and a lot of the stuff that comes right out of the Renaissance and the scientific revolution is going to look at this and go, Aristotle's on the right track here. This needs some tweaking, but the whole observing bit and then extrapolating from that and then doing something new, this will lead to the scientific method that we have today. It's not it, but it's part of the principles, or some of the principles are lurking in here. But definitely that empiricism, make conclusions based on observation. Now, I say all that about Aristotle, and then we're going to get to his notion of God, and you're going to be like, that doesn't look like empiricism. Well, it is, but he's doing it based on some presumptions that we would not include today. Even people in the 1600s wouldn't conclude today. So this reason, this is what makes us different, this ability to reason. We're animals plus. Anything that's alive has a soul in this sense. What happens to it when it dies? It's just gone. There's no sense here in which, like, when you die, your soul goes and floats up somewhere else. That's not here. This is the sense of the. If you're alive, you've got a soul, and it's not as though when you die it escapes somewhere. It's just like it's deactivated. It's absent. The form is gone. In that sense, we can tell when something. We know it when we see it. We can kind of recognize that. Now, the soul for Aristotle, in each one of these domains, vegetative, animal, rational, is what enables life in the first place. Okay, so for us, rational beings, the soul is the thing that lets us do our thinking. If you don't have a soul, you can't think. All right, now there is a Greek word for, this is where things get a little confused. There is a Greek word, nous, and we've already used it once before, meaning something different. That's your mind. So there's a sense in which these words start to get used a little bit interchangeably. They mean something a little bit different. Your mind, your soul, the psychic and the mental. Stuff going on. We even point here instrumentally. Where's your thinking happen? Here. Kind of? Show me the spot. Give me the XYZ axes of where a thought is happening in your brain. Can you find it? Does it take up space? Your thoughts. Think of something from your childhood. Think of your favorite food. All right, there's a thought going on. In where? In your brain? In your mind? In your soul? In any of those three cases, you're like, oh, there's no such thing as soul. We just have brains. Great. Where is that memory stored? Find it for me. Can we do that? Even if you're a modern physicalist, we should be able to, right? It's got to take up some space somewhere. Or it's floating somewhere in the cloud. Plato was right. When we're talking about these things, I'm not saying that things like souls or non-physical things exist or don't exist. That's not my point. My point is, sometimes we'll look back on this stuff and go, can you believe these idiots that lived a long time ago? be charitable. When you're looking backwards, give when you're, and this is true when you're dealing with opponents in a debate or looking at people in the past. Present the best version of your opponent or the past. Okay, that's what I mean by be charitable there. That doesn't mean be nice necessarily, but don't try and give a version of something just to say, oh, you can't believe how stupid these people were. I think that's disrespectful and disingenuous. So it's not as easy as all that. But this is the thing that enables us. This rational capacity is what enables us to use our reason. The soul is what allows us to think. No soul, no thinking. That's why an animal can't think in the same way. Like if you tell your dog, come here, will your dog come? Sure. If you tell your dog, come here next Tuesday at 2 p.m., is your dog going to do that? No. Now, you might be able to condition it in such a way that it always comes to it. There's no understanding of the concept of time there. Because why? Because they don't have this. Because that's not there. Like, the mouse can get to the cheese at the end of the maze. Is that rational? Did it sit down and go, let me come up with a diagram for this maze here? Maybe the rats of Nim, but that's not going on with other animals. They're not thinking in that way. Okay, so that's the notion of psyche. We'll revisit this again. I think this is a good framework. We'll revisit this again when we talk about the Aristotelian tradition. So this is sort of like the base model, and then there's going to be Christian Aristotelianism, which says, yes, this is God made this for you. You have this. Islamic Aristotelianism, Jewish Aristotelianism. There's also going to be all those three things with Platonism as well, and Neoplatonism too. Let's move on to this. Theos. What does it mean? God. What is Aristotle's God? Now, it's not our friends on Mount Olympus. It's not them. Aristotle says this, and I'm going to actually show his reasoning of how he gets there. Some of this he says in a book called Physics, which is about the physical world. Some of this he says in a book called Metaphysics, which is about stuff beyond the physical world. Sort of. There's another reason why it's got that title. Here's what he says. And this is Aristotle's universe. So before we get to the notion of God, let's take a look at what Aristotle's universe looks like. And you'll see how later, too, with different versions of Aristotelianism, you'll see how this is familiar to you. What's in the center of his word for universe would be cosmos. That's a Greek word that we still use, cosmos. So what's in the center? Where are we? Earth. So far, so good. Now you might be thinking, the sun's at the center. Technically, it's the very center, but that's another conversation. Okay? But we think, if you're thinking like, this, the Earth at the center, they got it wrong. Yeah, okay. But also about being charitable. You know, if you don't know the sun's at the center, can you believe these idiots? Go outside and look around. What does it look like? Does it look like the sun's going around us? It does. Just based on basic observation, which was that Aristotle's doing, that seems reasonable. It's only when, later on, people start having telescopes and going, the math doesn't add up if what I'm about to put on the board right now is true. That's how they figured out that the sun's at the center. It wasn't like, I got the right idea. The church told me the wrong thing. There is some of that. But it's that the math doesn't add up. Kepler's actually the one that ironed out the math, Johannes Kepler. Galileo and Copernicus did some things going, this is off because it doesn't look right. And I'll show you why in a little bit. So we got Earth at the center. What's next? What comes next? What's beyond the Earth immediately? The moon. Luna. The moon. Cool. What's after the moon? All the planets. I'm going to just diagram them with one. All the planets. Of which they knew of Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, which has been downgraded in my lifetime. You can't see those with a naked eye. You can use an app to figure out where they are, but you're not going to see them. Beyond the planets are the stars. Maybe there's some other stuff in here out there. There might be other layers in, but I think I like this generalization. Now, let's keep this diagram as it is for now. Aristotle's doing this based on observation. So here's what he notices. The closer you get to the center, the more ridiculous things are. I've lived on Earth for a while. I can confirm that things are pretty ridiculous down here. But that's just it. The closer you get to the center, the more motion there is. By motion in the sense of change. Things are ridiculous down here. What's tomorrow going to be like? What's the weather going to be like? Like today? Right now we're at the point of the year where I'm like, pick a temperature. And also, there's so much chaos down here in terms of organization. Okay, whereas, so here's the point. The further you go out, the more constancy there is. So let me zoom all the way out here. Stars. Now, the ancients knew this. You can go back 3,000 years. They could tell you, people, pretty much in any society, the Aztecs, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Chinese, they could give them a date and they can tell you, oh, pick a star, it'll be in this position on this date. We can do it right now, but the ancients could do it too. You go, August 20th, 2064, where's Polaris going to be at 8 o'clock in the afternoon? You can look it up right now. It's not a surprise. You can look it up. How? Because the stars are always in the same position. Always. Every year, same exact time. They don't change. They always show up in the exact same position. If you go in a little bit closer, planets. Oh, they're in the sky. They're not too ridiculous, but are planets ever in the same spot? No. They move around. In fact, that's what the word planet means. Wanderer. So the ancients were looking, going, okay, the blinking things stay in the same spot. The non-blinky ones, because planets don't twinkle. Okay, look at it. They don't twinkle. So the non-twinkly ones, they're in a different place every night. Remember a couple months ago, remember Jupiter and Saturn were like right next to each other? Not now. That won't happen again for hundreds of years. Why not? Because they're in all different kinds of spots all the time. Now we can still track them, like the stars, but they're never in the same place. That's because we're all on different levels of wheels going around the sun. That's why. And they didn't know that, but they knew that doesn't make any sense. And actually, if you follow the planet's motions relative to Earth, it looks like we do these little cursive things. Okay, like retrograde motion, it looks like we do. If you actually track it every night, it looks like they're making these little cursive L's in the sky. That's because we're spinning around the sun while they're spinning around the sun. Wacky stuff. Now, the moon. It's got good things going for it, 28 days. It's got that cycle. Full, half, not there, half back, full again, every 28 days. But where's it going to be in the sky? Your guess is as good as mine. Now, we can track that too, if we're looking very good. But you know what I'm talking about? Like the moon, like the sun, east to west, right? So it's up there it's somewhere between planets and moon. I should have put it up here too. But the moon, oh, there it is in the morning, and here it is in the evening, and now it's full, it's half there. Oh, look, it's a fingernail in the sky. Like it's changing all the time. Okay, so and then therefore everything in the sublunar realm that's under the moon is just bonkers. So here we don't deal with just, oh, we're kind of off track like a planet. Here, just everything's nuts. The waves do crazy things. The weather changes. Things erode. We have seasons. We have moods. All that kind of stuff. The world under the moon. Really, in a sense, is crazy. In fact, that's where we get our word loony, to mean like literally, as under the moon. Okay, wacky, ridiculous. So, based on this, what does this have to do with God? Well, think. Now, this is based on observation. Is he not correct? At least based on observation. The closer you get to the Earth on this model, the wackier things are. And the further you go out, the more permanent things are. Okay, the planets are a little less chaotic than the moon. Based on what he's at least seeing at the time. The stars are more fixed than the planets. Now he can't zoom in and see, okay, they're giant balls of helium and hydrogen gas, colliding into each other, making all this nuclear energy. He has no idea about that. At least in terms of their position, it's completely fixed. It's doing the same exact thing. Logically, then, it would follow, because we're this, beyond that, there must be something even more fixed and permanent. What's that? God. I know I have this as like a cross-section, but I want you to think of these not as circles, but as spheres. Like layers of spheres. Or one ball inside of the other, like those little Russian dolls. One ball inside the other. And outside all of it, but not really a ball itself, outside all of it is things. Which I think for Aristotle, to allay any confusion, yes, this takes a masculine form in the Greek, but let's go with it for pronouns here. There is no cosmic genitalia to be found here. This guy, again, in Greek it takes a masculine noun, he, but I think it here, so as not to confuse it with a personal divine like Hashem or the triune God or Allah. The farther you go out, the more permanent things are. Here's something that's really permanent. It doesn't change. If down here is chaotic change, there's no change. But also, in this model, kind of like with magnets, each level motivates, I don't want to say animates because that implies life, but motivates or moves the level underneath it. Now, I mean move in the sense of producing motion, like a magnet. Like if I take a south pole of a magnet, and I put it next to another south pole of a magnet, and I just push them right next, don't even make them touch. The other magnet's going to go, whoo, trying to be being repelled, right? It's going to be pushed, even if I don't make them have contact with each other because of the forces. Similarly, each level pushes or repels the level underneath it. So what's making us so wacky down here? The moon. Which is why, again, colloquially, do you think, hey, is it a full moon? Okay, things that have to do with dates. Is it Friday the 13th, full moon? Oh my God. Right, that kind of thing. Some of those things pop up. Oh, that happens once in a blue moon, which I think is a full moon when you have 2 full moons in 1 month. But even the word month comes from moons. So the moon is propelled by the sun, which again is a layer I did not put up there. The sun are propelled by the planets. The planets are moved by the stars. The stars, if there's anything else out there, is being moved by that. And all of that is being moved by Theos. That's the thing making this whole thing run. Now that's not to say, this is not saying, thousands of years ago, this God said, let there be light. That's not what's being said here. In fact, for Aristotle's purposes, Aristotle believes the universe has always been here. It never was created. It's just, why think that? It's just always been here. This show has always been going on. This is a point of contention for the Jews, Christians, and Muslims later, especially the ones who are Aristotelians. Well, Aristotle said it wasn't created. Well, he was wrong on that point. He's still correct on what this looks like in spite of the earth being created, or the universe being created, typically in 6 days, when we get there. But this God moves the universe. Now you might be thinking, maybe you're not, but we know based on, it's almost like Aristotle anticipated this. Isaac Newton's going to come a lot later and say there's 3 laws of motion. For, whatever is at rest remains at rest unless acted upon by an external force. Force equals mass times acceleration. Third one, though, every action, this one, has an equal and opposite reaction. No. Aristotle, this God moves the universe, makes it go, but is itself not moved. There's no risk. Even if I push against the wall's actually pushing back. It doesn't look like it. But that's physics. Yeah, that's Newton's third law. It's actually pushing back against me. This God gets no pushback because it is not affected in any way by anything. That's why it is what it is. It's unmoved. Nothing happens to it. So this God is immutable. It does not change. It's good. What does it mean by good here? Not good in a moral sense. Good in this sense. You have to know some Aristotelian terms here. Remember we have this potentiality and actuality. Remember those 2 things? So potentiality is where something could be something but it's not there, and actuality is it is what it is. Like right now you're all potential graduates, you're not actual graduates, but when you do graduate, yeah, you did it, now you're actual graduates. Well, here's the interesting thing about God. For Aristotle, there is no this. There is no potentiality in God whatsoever. God is not going to one day be, I think I'm going to start, knitting. No. God doesn't become anything. God is. Doesn't become anything. Constantly, doesn't change. God's not going to clock out one day, I quit. I'm done being God. The universe disappears. No. Always in a state of actuality. Which means, by the way, then, God doesn't learn. So if God learned something then, I didn't know that. Did God just change? Did God go from not knowing something to knowing something? Well, that can't be the case. So God knows everything that could be without being directly affected by it. So there's a sense in which this God knows everything, but there's also another sense in which this God doesn't know you and doesn't care about you at all. This is not a God who loves you and has a plan for your life. This God knows only itself. Not that it's selfish. That's the best thing for, what possible, if God could study something, what's the thing that God should study? Itself, because God is the best thing. It's the highest thing in the universe. It's the most perfect. It's the most perfect, and this is a word we use a lot. What do we mean when we say something is perfect? Now, there's a colloquial sense. It's perfect. We're on to something there. So when we say something's perfect, what do we mean by it? What's that?
Flawless.
Oh, I like that. Flawless. I really like flawless there, actually. I think that's a good one. Lacking nothing. I think that would be an exact synonym to what you just said. Complete. Like, God doesn't need anything else. God's not like no. You know how you might be thinking, like, when I get a little bit more money, I'm going to go buy this thing. Then I'll be good. You won't be good. But you think you will. Like, once I get that, I'll be good. There's always something else. Right? I see some of you nodding. That doesn't happen with God, and not just in the sense of money, but there's not like, maybe one day I should take up welding. Or maybe I'll create another. There's no sense of, I'm going to do this thing, and then I'll be good. Already got it. Perfect. Flawless in the sense of, I don't need to do anything. Already complete. That's why there's no potentiality there. God is pure. In fact, some people say that a pure act. When the Aristotelians say God is pure act, they mean he is what he does. And he does what he is. His existence is his essence. Or its existence in this case. So let me define those terms. What is something's essence? What it is. What is something's existence? What it does. Sure. So like my essence, what am I? I'm a human being. That's substantia. It's another word for ousia, being. What am I? I'm a human being. What's my existence? I'm a teacher. We'll roll with that. I can be other things too. Okay, I'm a son. I'm a father. Existence, what something does. Essence, what something is. God's essence is his existence. What is it? It is God. What does it do? It's God. It is what it does. That's not what's true with us. Or really anything else. God's a kind of special case here. It is what it does, and it does what it is. To the point where, actually, what does God do? What is the godly thing to do? This is a weird translation. But thought, thinking, thought. It's usually how it gets translated. Noehi hodus. Okay, that notion of mind. Thought, thinking, thought. What is God? Well, yeah, its essence is it's God. We got that. But what is God? What, does it have a physical form? No. So what is it? It's thought. But what thought means in the ancient world means something that is but is non-physical. That's what it's meant by it. So it doesn't mean like there's like, is there some sort of like brain energy up there? No. But there's this non-physical stuff, and what does it do? It acts towards itself. Really, I could translate that mind that minds. What is it? Non-physical stuff. What does it do? Non-physical stuff. What does it contemplate? What does God do? God thinks about itself. It contemplates its own being. And that's the best thing it possibly could do. Let's take a look at where he says this. Metaphysics, book 12, section 7. This then, theos, is the sort of principle, that word there, principle is arche in the Greek. Remember? Water. Air. This is it. Here's Aristotle's arche. This is the arche. Actually, Aristotle's the one who, in parts of the same book, Metaphysics, is the one that tells us, here's what Thales said, here's what Anaximander, we get a lot of that from the same book. This is the arche. It's God. It's God. The principle on which the heaven, the uranos, and nature depend. Its way of life has the same character as our own way of life. At its best has for a short time. So just like we get these little moments of actuality where we're like, yes, I did it. I'm good. God's like that all the time. It's like an ecstatic bliss. We get these little moments of happiness, right? Pleasure dissipates. We feel really good and it's gone. And we're like, I want more of that, please. God's always in that state of perfection, flawlessness. For the primary mover, that is, it's the one really motivating all of this. Sometimes called the first mover. Primary mover. The primary mover is always in this state of complete actuality, whereas we cannot always be in it. For its actuality is also pleasure. That is why being awake, perceiving, and thinking are pleasantest, while expectations and memories are pleasant because of these. That is to say, we have these things where we remember when we were actualized. You remember when that thing happened? That was good? Yeah, that was good. But the memory is not as good as the actual event for us, is it? Like we look back to the good times, and we do two things. Like our human beings, our two favorite things to do are remember good times, which we're probably not as good as we think we are, In fact, every time you have a memory, your perception of the memory changes. You actually end up rewriting it every time. You're like, oh, yeah, uh-huh. Your mind, your brain ends up rewriting part of the memory. You change it every time you think about it. That's why when you get together with people that have the same event, what? Really? I forgot about that thing. And then we remember back to the good things, and then we look forward to good things, right? I really hope this good thing happens. Often at the expense of now. So we're remembering back, remembering forward. Here I am, this little sliver in the middle. We'll talk about that more when we get to existentialists in the 19th and 20th centuries. We're really bad at being here. We're usually thinking backwards or thinking forward. Maybe to our own detriment. Continuing Aristotle. Understanding. That's how this book translates. This thinking or thought. Understanding in its own right of what is best is in its own right. That is, it thinks about itself. And it's the highest degree of understanding of what it is best to the highest degree in its own right. And understanding understands itself. Thought, thinking, thought. Mentality that mentates itself. Sure, I'll go with that. Noehi ho nous. It thinks itself. For understanding is what it is capable of receiving as the object of understanding, which is its essence. It contemplates itself. Sometimes I've seen it translated as intellect that intellects itself, or intelligence that thinks about itself. Isn't it great? What Aristotle means by this is that God contemplates its own being. That's all God does. Thinks about itself. And as a result of thinking of itself, that's what actually makes the universe go. It's analogous to, no analogy is perfect, but I think of it like a musical artist on a stage at a concert. I remember this time before COVID when you could go to a concert. Anybody ever been to a concert? Okay, well, all right. So, think about this. Here's the analogy. The artist is on stage, they're performing. Do they really see you out in the crowd? They see the crowd. Do they see you? If you're not in the front row? No. But what's the crowd doing at a concert? Unless it's a terrible concert. I've been to a couple of those. What's the crowd doing? Okay, everybody's going crazy, right? Why is the crowd motivated in this way? By the artist performing. So the crowd is motivated. There's no direct contact. It's not like the artist is like, okay, move. But we're motivated by the performance. But they're not moved by us in the same way because they don't see us, because we're little blips out in the crowd. On this analogy, the artist performing is kind of like God, motivating everything, making it work. And we're being motivated, we the audience, we the universe are being motivated by it, even though there's no physical contact. I love this song. And that's what makes the universe go round. In motion. All these spheres are in motion because of their... Now, sometimes they'll say the love of God. What is meant by love of God here is love in the sense of like a magnetic attraction. It's moved because of the motivation of the divine moving it. That's how it's acting in accordance with the divine. But the divine is itself unmoved. God's not going, oh, I'm spinning too. That's not what's happening. It's unmoved because it is unaffected by anything. If then, continuing, the God, ho theos, is always in the good state that we are in sometimes, that deserves wonder. If he's in a better state, that deserves still more wonder. And that is indeed the state he is in. Further, life belongs to the God. Something even higher up the list, maybe. Does God have a soul? Well, no, because it doesn't have a form. It doesn't need to. It is what it is, and it does what it does. For the actuality of understanding, this thought is life. And God is that actuality, and his actuality is in its own right, is the best and everlasting life. So this is just amazing. It's always been this way, it always will be this way. Nothing changes, and it's always in the state of immutable, that is unchanging pleasantness. We say then that the God has the best and everlasting living being, so that continuous and everlasting life and duration belong to the God, for that is what the God is. Isn't it great? Does this God know you? Indirectly. Because it knows everything, it kind of knows who you are. And it's not like, I don't mean in the sense of like it has to index it, like, oh, yeah, hang on, let me look you up in my index of all the things. No, it could, if it needed to, it could access that immediately. Nothing's unimmediate, but it just doesn't, and it's not that it doesn't care or is selfish. It's just, it's got better things to do. Like, contemplate itself. That's the best thing it could do. And as a result of contemplating itself, indirectly it knows everything. But it doesn't go out of its way to know. I think a lot of the Jewish philosophers would talk about this, too. They'll say that that's Hashem. He knows you a little bit more intimately than that, but he doesn't need to. I think that's good for Aristotle. Any questions about Aristotle? Let's move on to Hellenistic philosophy. So as I've already indicated, because of Alexander the Great, Greek thought spreads all throughout the world in proximity to Greece. So parts of the Mediterranean, all the way to parts of India and beyond, indirectly. As I said, all the way up to the mountains of Afghanistan. What happens to Aristotle? Well, eventually, after Alexander dies, he dies a year later, the Athenians take on a hostile tone. Apparently they threaten to execute him just like Socrates, and he says, I'm out. And goes away. But he leaves a legacy as well. Now, his legacy in the West doesn't really come until about 1,000 years later. His logic stuff, which we didn't really talk about, like some of his stuff on categories, like we talked about the different kinds of predication, that stuff is known in Europe for a while, continuously. But a lot of the stuff I just said about God and the soul, that doesn't sync up in Europe until really the 900s. They're into Plato for a really long time. But it continues in the East. We'll talk about that. But at the same time, Plato is one take where they're looking back at Aristotle, the Platonists and Plato are looking back at Socrates going, we're doing what he did, we're asking questions, but also the forms. But that's really what Socrates was doing. It wasn't, but that's their claim. Aristotle is at least saying, I'm doing what Socrates was doing in the sense that I'm engaging in investigation and asking questions. But for me, it's based on observation. But Aristotle even admits, like, I really wouldn't be doing the kind of stuff that I'm doing if Socrates hadn't been around. Okay, that's kind of what motivates me. So Socrates becomes the symbol of thinking. But there are 4 different crews, if you will, or groups that come along that really say, no, no, no. Forget Plato, forget Aristotle. We're doing things the Socratic way. And there's 4 different versions of this, and all of them claim that, no, we're doing what Socrates was doing. No, we're doing what Socrates was doing. What are they? 4 groups. So here are 4 different takes on we're the real Socrates fan club, if you'll permit me that. We're really doing what Socrates was doing. And some of them are like, I think the early skeptics were originally Cynics. That's why I want to start with the Cynics. And they kind of are all around at the same time as the Aristotelians and the Platonists. And they're all, I don't want to say competing for each other. These all have their own schools too. Remember, Plato has the Academy. Aristotle has the Lyceum. These all have their own schools too. Some of them are more or less popular in Rome. Stoics are a big deal in the Roman Empire when the Romans come on the scene. It is really big. In fact, one Roman emperor, Marcus Aurelius, who wrote Meditations, is a Stoic philosopher. What's his day job? Caesar. But he comes later, so that's the late 2nd century. These words all get used today, colloquially, so we can talk about someone being skeptical. I'm even doing the eyebrow thing already. Right? I'm going to talk about someone being skeptical. What does it mean for someone to be skeptical? Yeah, my first name is Thomas, so I've been told this my whole life. Oh, doubting Tom? Yeah, I got it. In the sense of like being like doubting, second guess. Yeah. All right. So that's how we use it. It's not exactly what it means with them, but that's what it invokes today. What does it mean? This one we don't use too much. Epicurean. We do. It means like a place like the Fresh Market or something like that, or Whole Foods. It's called an Epicurean Market. What does that mean? Oh, they sell like fine things. Like, are you gonna go if you go to the Fresh Market or an Epicurean Market? Are you go to the cheese section? Are you gonna find Kraft singles? No. What are you going to find? Cheeses that are hard to pronounce. So Epicurean means like fine things. It's sort of like wine, cheeses, those kinds of things. In its modern usage. That's not exactly what's going on there. There's something to that there. We use this one sometimes, stoic. What does it mean to be stoic? I'll sometimes see the adjective stoical. Not quite right, but okay. What does it mean to be stoic?
Like not really affected by outside influence, just kind of.
Yep. Yeah, like unaffected, disaffected, and sometimes meaning like no emotion. They're there. Something really bad happened. Uh-huh. So when someone's stoic, yeah. They're not really, sometimes it can be like outside, any outside influence. Sometimes it can be especially emotional influence. Right? Sometimes, I'm not saying that it is, so yeah, that's good. So stoic in terms of how it's used, there's something to that, and then this one. What does it mean to be cynical? Not the same thing as skeptical.
More pessimistic.
Yeah. Like, so you ask a skeptic, is the glass half full or the glass half empty? A skeptic would say something like, is there a glass? The cynic, on the other hand, would say, of course there's no glass, we lost it. We just lost our life. Again, they would, like that negative, pessimistic, everything's terrible kind of thing. That's the way we use cynicism today. That's not quite what they're into, but those are the modern uses of the word. So what are the actual cynics? Let's start with that. Comes from the Greek kunikos. Literally, that's related to the Latin word canine. So dog. Literally, what are the cynics? Dog people. Or the dogs. Not really meant as a compliment either. Left to their own devices, what will dogs do? Well, like if it's not domesticated, where's that dog going to live? Out on the street. Here's what a cynic is. And all four of these groups are all talking about virtue. But you might see that, and then look at what they're doing, especially what the cynics are doing, and go, how is that virtue? The cynics, what are they into? Live like a dog. What do you mean, live like a dog? It's not that hard. Live like a dog. If you go back and look at things that Socrates said, did he care about money? No. Fame? Fortune? No, if anything, the cynics conclude that Socrates was telling us that all that stuff going after, like really the problem that the politicians and the musicians and the craftsmen had is their own esteem and pride, wanting to live civilized lives. There are parts of the Phaedo, which is heavily Platonic, but parts of the Phaedo where Socrates said, wars are only caused by the acquisition of wealth. So the cynics look at this and go, all right, we don't care about wealth. In fact, we don't care about anything. We don't care about you. And really, that's their attitude. So we could say, really, there are three virtues of cynicism. So let me go over this. And they didn't write things down. Why? Would a dog do that? No. You want to figure out what it's like to live like a dog? Do it yourself. This is what they mean by a dog-like living. And they think this is kind of what Socrates was into, but we're going to take it to the extreme. And really, all four of them are doing this. All four of these groups are doing that thing where they go, we're going to take Socrates and take it to a whole other level. Here's the cynic take on it. We'll talk about the other ones next time. I'm going to stop with cynicism today because we're running out of time. Self-sufficiency. We don't need your polis. What do I mean by polis? The city. That's where we get our word politics, police, metropolis. We don't need the city. We don't need the government. We don't need the state. We don't need society. We don't need your little shops. Everything we need, we got ourselves. We'll take care of ourselves. It was like a DIY attitude in the ancient world. I'll make my own clothes. Probably not going to wear any anyway. But I'm gonna take care of myself. I'm gonna get my own food. I got it. That's self-sufficiency. I don't need anybody else. Don't care about anybody else. Because that stuff gets in the way of doing philosophy. It distracts us from the things that are really important. Well, I don't want to. No, I have to make sure that I'm comfortable. You're doing it wrong. Socrates told us about that. Austerity. Related to self-sufficiency. Don't overdo it. Austerity. Now, we talk about austerity in politics sometimes, like, oh, we need to have less government spending. Austerity, like personally, I don't need anything fancy. As long as it works. If I'm going to have anything at all, I really need less. Okay, all those things you think you need, you don't need them. I remember my parents saying things like that. We got McDonald's at home. Right? Mom, that's a can of beans. And they're off-brand. Austerity, which is related to asceticism or ascetics. What do I mean by that? Refraining from any kind of physical need. Okay? We don't need anything. I'm going to eat, like, stuff like, even, this is related to Buddha, possibly the Cynics might have had an influence with Buddhism, which had already been around, or might have been simultaneous, like getting away from the body. Denying oneself as much as possible. Last one here, shamelessness. An ideate. What do I mean by shamelessness? Now, this is a virtue for the Cynics. This is something they say, we do this. What is shamelessness? I don't care. I don't care what you think. I don't care what you think. I don't care. Like an absolute attitude of not only do I not care, I'm going to do things on purpose to piss you off and make you angry. Now, Diogenes apparently would go masturbate in public. I'm not recommending that. Okay? What? Are you mad? Why are you mad? Well, I think that's inappropriate. Why do you think it's inappropriate? Probably because you have this idea of society and things that we're supposed to do that are polite. Why? Because they're doing that questioning thing. But it's more intense. Socrates did not do that. All right? This is like super intense. Are you upset? Did I make you mad? Sometimes stuff with modern art. Okay, there's a cynical attitude. This is ancient cynicism. Do things to make you mad and then go, why are you mad? Why are you upset? Well, that's inappropriate. What is appropriate? Define appropriateness. Come on, use the phone. Okay, get it together. And that's exactly what they would do. But they wouldn't write anything down because I don't care if you. I don't know how to read. I don't care, and neither should you. Not polite, but does it get you thinking? The cynics evidently did. So that's what we got there for today. Have a good one, everybody.